Hello, hello. It's a pleasure to see you today, folks. My name is Dustin Cormier, and today we are embarking on another episode of How to Rock Astrology. In particular, we're going to be diving into Mula Nakshatra and its Nakshatra Sutra. Of course, this is continuing our series on the 27 nakshatras, particularly coming from what are called the Nakshatra Sutras of the Taittiriya Brahmana. So, it's a pleasure to see you all today. It's been a little while since I've done a nakshatra video. I'm trying to keep them going, you know. I think with these nakshatra videos, my intention is really to get them, all 27 of them, on the way through. Now, if you keep your eyes open and you keep checking things out, you'll notice that I've got the 27 Nakshatra Sutras, and as well, we are also doing little in-between things, like we've got the Rahu Ketu, we've got the Nakshatra Native, which will be coming out soon. Hello, Oma Zubair, nice to see ya. So we're going to also have little snippets of each of these nakshatras coming out as we go along. So let's start digging into today's nakshatra. It's Mula Nakshatra. You will notice when you read about the Mula native, it's often considered that Mula natives have some difficulty associated with them because of the ruling deity of this nakshatra, Nirrti. Nirrti is almost considered to be, in some ways it's correlated with Kalima, with the necessary dark, you know, we know that reality and consciousness goes in a spire, and as all of us back here in samsara are following Krishna's blue flute towards the delicious sound of samadhi in the infinite eternal now that is permeating through us in this moment. We know that consciousness rises in a spire, but in order for there to be an up, there is also a down, and some say that Mula is considered to be a part of this down. But as we're going to talk about, it is still one of the 27 nakshatras. It is still a divine agent of consciousness evolution. So keep this in mind as we read and hear about Mula. This video, of course, is going to paint it from the perspective of somebody with placements in Mula. And we know that anybody with any placements in any nakshatra cannot be defined by one point in the chart. And as well, Mula has good redeeming qualities. I think this is important to say, because when a lot of people read about it, it seems all darkness and foreboding. Now, as usual with this series, I have a little introduction I'm going to do. Before I do, I'm going to say thank you for watching, and keep in mind that I have some books coming out. You're going to see my new book coming out hopefully next year or sometime before I die. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm still writing it right now. As well, we're going to be doing some sun and moon videos soon. Feel free to check those out. Now let's start digging in here, folks. This is the beginning of our 27 Nakshatra series introduction. For all of you interested, you ought to know that I am a tropical Vedic astrologer. So I practice with 12 tropical rashis overlaid on the 27 sidereal star-based nakshatras. Because in our idea of things, the constellations are different from the signs. The nakshatras are made up of star constellations. So this is how I work with the nakshatras as a tropical astrologer. Now, I've got a great video called The Age of Aquarius Debunked that really fizzles together this tropical sidereal debate from a tropical astrologer's perspective. Now, this is a story I often give. You can see more of this in my introduction video at the beginning of this series, the beginning of this playlist. But essentially, there was a demon Rakshasa, an ego, and this ego was getting so big that it was acting out of alignment with the cosmos. And all the devas were all worried, so they all called Vishnu. And Vishnu is the one who always shows up to fix things when the gods have trouble. So Vishnu comes and says, oh, I know how I'll trick them. It'll be easy. And Vishnu comes in the form of a midget, a tiny an atom, a little dot. And he comes to the giant Rakshasa. And he says, hey there, I'm just looking for a boon. The Rakshasa says, what boon do you want? He says, I want 3 footsteps, please. The Rakshasa's like, you're so small, that'll be nothing. And Vishnu says, great. So being everything, being the atom, being the permeating expanse of space, time, and the essence of everything, Vishnu took one giant stride, and he took up the stars, the constellations. Then he took up local space with his second step. That's the tropical zodiac. With his third step, he stepped on the demon's head. And in this metaphorical case, this represents the horizon, the houses, etc. Now this story is much deeper than this, but this is one way of conveying the fact that deep space, local space, and geomantic space are 3 different, completely different interlocking wheels. So in this series, we're aiming to convey that nakshatras as they are without the sign associations. And you're going to see as we talk about it in this little introduction, just to give a quick short thrift here, I should probably change my Giesta to... as you're going to hear and see and read about the sidereal tradition of jyotish. Jyotish is Vedic astrology. It's essentially, jyotish is anything to deal with astronomy as it relates to the human psyche. There is a sidereal tradition of jyotish, and there is a tropical tradition of jyotish. The tropical people believe that the nakshatras and the signs do not connect, that they're not married together. You know, in about 5,000 years, the sign of Mula is no longer going to be in Scorpio, it's going to be in Sagittarius or Capricorn or whatever it is. So the signs are moving along the backdrop of the stars over a 24,000 year period. It revolves around. This is due to the precession of the equinox. So because of this fact, tropical astrologers believe the nakshatras do not have the inherent qualities of the signs. Now, there's an old tradition in India where, and from our perspective, it's a little bit superstitious, it's a little bit stuck in its ways, where they have the idea that the nakshatras are married to the signs, which means, for example, Mula has inherent qualities related to, I believe it would be probably Scorpio. I don't know where it is in the sidereal tradition right now. All I know is where it is in our own tradition. Let's see, Mula. Oh, so Mula for us is actually in Sagittarius now. Okay, so this is actually a good example. Mula in the old tradition was said to be in Scorpio. Now Mula falls into Sagittarius because the signs have shifted. But the old tradition believes Mula has inherent, it's in the pincers of the Scorpion, the constellation. Even if that constellation does exist, we see a Scorpion there. According to tropical astrologers, that sign is actually made up. They use their imagination to imagine the pincers. So again, check out my videos if you want to know more about the sidereal tropical thing. But in the essence of it is that Mula is not conditioned by any sign. It just has its own qualities, and that's what we're aiming to talk about here in this whole series. Now, in order to do so, we need to find literature that does not have this distortion, as I like to call it. The distortion is the fact that traditions started, when they started talking about Mula Nakshatra, they started thinking, oh, well, if it's in Scorpio, then it has these qualities. Now, the horoscope and the idea of Scorpio is only like 2,000 years old. 2,000, 2,500, you know, like 500 BC would be the very earliest where you would see the zodiac. But the nakshatras existed like 3,000 years ago or more. The literature we get the nakshatras from, the old Indian astronomy never used all the planets, and they mainly, it was a sun-moon based astrology that used the nakshatras. And this is older than the zodiac and the 12 signs. The 27 nakshatras are much older. So, if there's literature that talks about the nakshatras before the zodiac even existed, we know it's not going to be distorted by cultural licentious interpreters. So how do we find that old undistorted literature? Is we got to go back before the zodiac was created. And this particular text is one of the emerging texts that is considered to be of Vedic era, although it's actually a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda. It's considered to be a continuation of it. It's not technically Vedic era, but this is considered to be by Ernst Wilhelm and Vic Dicara. Most of the folks in the tropical Vedic astrology tradition are pointing at this as the authentic text for defining the qualities of the nakshatras without distortion. It's called the Taittiriya Brahmana. Now again, you'll hear more about all this in my introduction to this series. I have a playlist on it. Now, the distortion is twofold. There's the incorrect signs, the sign distortion we've talked about, but there's also, this second one is something that's debated. There are associations with what's called the Vimshottari Lord. It's the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in that nakshatra. So, for example, Mula's ancient ruler is Ketu, right? So, just to give this short thrift, if you're born with the moon falling in Mula, then the first thing that you would have experienced, the first energy, the first dasha that you would have experienced, Mahadasha that is, would be Ketu Mahadasha. So they say Mula has something to do with Ketu. You can kind of see why. There's the rootedness of Mula. It's the center of the galaxy. It has this negating karma, purifying quality to it. Now, Ernst Wilhelm doesn't necessarily hate these associations of the nakshatra ruler or the Vimshottari lord of a nakshatra. But Vic Dicara has said that this is also a cultural distortion because Vimshottari, the Mahadashas, again, didn't come out until the zodiac and the horoscope was created. Now, the Taittiriya Brahmana goes before the Vimshottari was created. So there's a pure essence to these nakshatra sutras that talks about the nakshatras even without this second distortion, the assimilation of the nakshatra with its Vimshottari lord. So regardless of whether Mula is ruled by Ketu, we're going to be hearing about the pure essence of Mula here. Let me just check to see if we're all good here. Greetings, Brutus. Greetings, Amar Ahmad. Got somebody with Sun, Moon, Jupiter in Mula. Gogo Pogo, nice to see ya. Now here's a good question. Let's see. Monster Reviews is asked. Oh, first I should say hello, Sammy. Haribal, nice to see ya. Now Monster Reviews, one of our viewers, is asking, is Mula Nakshatra comes as one of the Gandanta? So in the tropical tradition, we kind of, there might still be something interesting about the Gandanta points, but there is no inherent connection between the Gandanta and the nakshatras in the tropical system. Because tropically, so a Gandanta was anciently known as a space where a water sign would turn into a fire sign. For example, Pisces turning into Aries, Cancer turning into Leo, and then Scorpio turning into Sagittarius. Mula is said to be anciently on a Gandanta, which is the bridge point between Scorpio sign and Sagittarius sign. It's in fact supposed to have been considered a very heavy space, and it could still be. But one of the reasons Mula was considered to be so heavy was because it was on this Gandanta between Scorpio and Sagittarius. We now know that in modern times, as we're going to show here, the sign of Mula falls in 24 degrees of tropical Sagittarius. According to Ernst, it's more like about 21 and a half, right? So 21 and a half degrees of Mula, 24 degrees of of Sagittarius, around there. So in the tropical Vedic tradition, Gandantas could still be an interesting thing, but there's no assimilation, there's no association of nakshatras to Gandantas. I hope that's clarifying, Monster Reviews. Yep, so Monster Reviews has mentioned like Revati to Ashwini was considered to be one of these Gandanta points. Especially back in those days, the Ashwini was considered to be married to Aries. So the whole zodiac started at Ashwini. So since the nakshatras go in trines, Mula started exactly on Sagittarius, and then something else would have started exactly on Leo. I think maybe Magha. And these were considered Gandantas because they were considered to be at that exact point. But again, we know that the signs have moved from the stars. So that's why we don't consider the Gandantas to be relevant to the nakshatra. Right? So that was a good question, Monster Reviews, and thanks for asking. Now let's take a quick peek here at the positions of Mula again. Now you guys just heard me say it. I gotta get it straight with these guys because Vic and Ernst's nakshatra ayanamshas often vary. As you get to certain parts of the zodiac, it varies even worse and heavier. Mula is at 24 degrees in Vic's system. He basically follows Lahiri ayanamsha applied to tropical measurements. But Ernst has his own sort of funky, it's a Dhruva equatorial longitude based ayanamsha. So it's not fixed in a complete circle with a fixed amount of degrees. You'll notice the patterns in Vic's is always the same. They're 13 degrees and 20 minutes of arc long, the nakshatras. Whereas Ernst's has a little bit more wiggle room. To be honest with you, I'm more of an Ernst guy than a Vic Dicara guy where this is concerned. But I digress. Us as modern astrologers, we have to find out for ourselves what feels most comfortable where planets fall. So for example, if you have a planet that falls at 22 degrees of Mula, of Sagittarius rather, in your tropical chart, it might be possible that you're kind of on the cusp of Mula, and Jesta basically. So in Ernst's system, you would be Mula, but in Vic's system, you would still be Jesta. What I recommend, you can contact somebody who has Kala software, or you can just look at this little cheat sheet. But even this cheat sheet is a little bit funky, I'm always learning, expanding on it. So it's likely, though, that if you have a planet, for example, at 22 degrees Mula, it would probably be Mula, but you have to feel it out. In today's modern times, we have to do our own diligent data and research and feel which of these nakshatras relates most closely to our own experience. It's a bit of a bitch, it's kind of annoying that we have to do this, but, the work that we do now is going to save people and help people hundreds of years from now when this data has been collected and everyone sees, okay, it was obviously Ernst's nakshatra that was correct, or it was obviously Vic's, or whatever. Probably Ernst's, in my opinion. Right? Now again, I'm just going to do a quick check of my comments. Cool. Yep, so people are saying that it's heavy to have Mula Nakshatra. So we're going to talk a little bit about that heaviness. Awesome. I'm glad that Monster Reviews was happy with that comment. You actually have Amar Ahmad saying that they have their Atmakaraka in Mula and loves it. So let's see how this goes as we begin to discuss the nature of Mula. Now, here we're going to discuss 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. These qualities aren't given directly in the Taittiriya Brahmana. So these are kind of culled by cultural intuitions and commentaries. Some of these might be based on the 2 distortion points we've already mentioned. It's hard to say. It's hard to know what came from where. So when we read about these classical descriptions of the nakshatras, sometimes it can be very cool and it can be very to me, a lot of these are very revealing. And Ernst Wilhelm takes particular care to look at the animal kingdom. Or the kingdom, rather. So that's animal, plant, and mineral. However, I've even seen Vic Dicara describe nakshatras through the 7 qualities, Dhruva, Chara, Tikshna, etc. So I keep these in to show, and again, it's just like we've been talking about with everything else. In modern times, we have to observe for ourselves these classical, traditional character qualities of the nakshatras that have been described of the nakshatras, and see for ourselves if these character qualities relate to the literature we read and the meditations that we have when we contemplate the sutras of the Taittiriya Brahmana. Because the Nakshatra Sutras of the Taittiriya Brahmana is the essence. It holds the absolute core of the nakshatras. So we have to study them, digest them, and see if we can see these character qualities in our meditations, right? So there's the activity, the 7 qualities, the sexual yoni animal that's used in traditional Indian marriage assessment very strongly, as well as the kingdom. And again, Ernst Wilhelm gives particular relevance to the kingdom ascribed to any nakshatra. Now, Mula is interesting. It kind of stands out a little bit amongst the Tikshna nakshatras. The other 3 of these Tikshna nakshatras, they're also called Daruna, which is hard. They're hard, they're sharp, they're dreadful. Having the moon in any of these places gives a snappy, sharp, heavy energy. Now, it's interesting that Ashlesha and Jesta are both active Mercury nakshatras ruled and are animal, the Jiva nakshatras. Ardra is a little bit different, being anciently ruled by Rahu, and it's also an animal, Tikshna nakshatra. So the other 3 of 4 Tikshna, dreadful nakshatras, are animal Jiva nakshatras in the animal kingdom. So Mula stands out among them and is considered to be a mineral, a Dhatu nakshatra. It's of course known for being the male dog yoni animal. So, and we can see the name means root. Mula, we've often hear that Mula relates to, in ancient times, one of the great ways of expelling or purging poisons or toxins or some kind of disease inside the body would be to bundle up a bunch of herbs at their roots, bundle up the roots, and then either burn them or do different sacrificial things, ingest them, make a concoction out of them, whatever it would be, to get the essence of that root to purge and purify the disease. So this is part of the negative and positive quality of Mula. It's there for a reason. Now, Mula, again, is considered to be a Dhatu nakshatra. So we have the 3 different types. We've got Mula. Ironically, Mula is not a Mula nakshatra. We have Dhatu, Mula, and Jiva nakshatras. So I should put it this way because I'm backwards from the camera. This is Dhatu is mineral. Then Mula is the center. It's kind of Mula plant nakshatras go between the mineral and the animal world. And then, of course, there's animals who are more like evolved, but not necessarily evolved as in more intelligent or anything, but it's just they're into more human activities. Most of these Tikshna nakshatras, as we can see here, you'll have to excuse me, I pressed the wrong button. Most of these Tikshna dreadful nakshatras, that's Ardra, Ashlesha, and Jesta. All 4 of these, including Mula, are known for being sharp and hard. Now, the other 3 Tikshna nakshatras are animal kingdom nakshatras. You can actually see how these are conveyed. Ernst Wilhelm describes the same 3 by describing the mutabilities of the signs. Cardinal relates with Dhatu, minerals. Fixed signs relate with plants. And then mutable signs, Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, are jiva, animal. Dhatu are opportunistic. They're looking at the environment all around them. They actually involve themselves in the physical world. The plant nakshatras go between the other two. And then the animal, the jiva nakshatras, are mutable signs that are they're more globalists. They're more seeing, they don't dig their hands into the actual environment. They look all around. They're like on the internet. They're mercantile moguls of greater international corporate consciousness. The Dhatu people tend to have their fingers dug, because even if you have a global thing like McDonald's or some kind of big, huge Walmart company, the products that are being created there are created by people. There's a chain that goes down the line, and eventually it ends up at a farm with people growing vegetables, manufacturing raw metals and dirt and materials and rock. And somewhere along the line, the Dhatu people are just as important as the Jiva people. So Dhatu people are looking more into the earth. They're looking at materials, their environment. They need to have they can be people who are grounded in the physical reality. They are seeking out their environment. They are aware that they need to have a proper environment in order to function properly. In fact, Mula, being this uprooter of lies, as we're going to talk about, Mula is this dreadful, sharp nakshatra that will cut through everything in order to get to the truth, the root of things. And how they do it is through Dhatu, through this mineral consciousness. So they make good like detectives. They're a private eye. They make good people who are good at like seeing evidence, fingerprints, like digging into the ugly, gutty, physical dirt of things and making connections. They can be great chemists and physicists who can see how chemistry works and get right down to the nose of some critical thing that could either help humanity or they could be poison makers. Mula is very capable of digging deeply and harshly, sharply, focused on one point and to follow a direction that will take their nose to a necessary place that they're trying to go, an endpoint, a discovery, or to, especially when they're snooping something out in order to bring justice to a person. They use the material world very strongly in this regard. As well, they tend to build things on their own. They don't need the help from other people. They will tend to build a company on their own. Or, again, they're geniuses at digging into how what's in their own backyard can bring them some kind of global commerce, or some kind of commerce, anyway. Some kind of genius invention. Hey, Mo. Nice to see you. So this is a little bit descriptive of some of the character of Mula, right? Now, let's start digging into the sutra structure of the Taittiriya Brahmana. Now again, this is the Taittiriya Brahmana. This is what I keep talking about as this undistorted literature. It's basically unfolds in a sutra-like structure. So you guys have probably heard this in my channel. I talk about how the sutra always unfolds in a predictable way. It's like how I often describe it is like, if you have a melody, do, re, mi, fa, ti, do. I can't sing as tightly as I would like to be, but you can hear the space. You can hear do, re, mi, fa, ti, do. There we go. You can hear those two notes. Like it's implied that there's notes spanning the chasm between the notes I speak and then the notes I miss out on and then the end point. Sutras are like this. They hold, there's a melody, there's a scale, and it's a 6-pointed scale. And whenever a word is in there, its place in the melody implies further data. Because when these sutras were created, this was like 3,000 years ago or more. Some say 4,000 years ago. This was created at a time where writing was not as applicable. They didn't have the thing that could, the printing press, whatever it is, that could manufacture more pieces of paper. So the arbiters of knowledge and ancient wisdom had to think for themselves and say, you know, let's create a limerick, let's create a rhyme, let's create a mantra that will, it's a sutram, really. It's like a doctor's sutra. You know, if you cut a hole in your arm, you tie it up with sutram. So a sutra ties in knowledge together. And what you only ever see is the surface of the iceberg, but there's a deep underpinning of meaning hidden underneath it. And its place in the melody implies further data. So that's why we show, because the reason they did this was that instead of making a long commentary on the sutras, on the nakshatras that they all had to memorize, they wanted to make a code. And encoded in this code has all of the data that you can intuit yourself. You could think about the words and the roots of the words and come to a conclusion on what is being said about this nakshatra through your own meditative power. So this is the reason why they did this, is because in an oral tradition, if you can condense data into a poem of some sort, then all you have to do is bring out that poem, and then we can all talk about it after. But having that poem, that sutra, is like it's like a condensed gemstone, a condensed candy that unfurls the wisdom for the sake of efficiency and expediency in memorizing and teaching the ancient wisdom. So this is the reason why people use these sutras, and that's why it's put the way it is. Now, again, as I said, there's 6 pieces. This whole structure that I'm explaining, this comes from Vic Dicara's website. So he's got a great thing. So he's got a Nakshatra Sutras course on vicdicara.com. It's where I get the most of my understanding of these nakshatras. I highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out already. It's probably the best thing that I've done in terms of my knowledge of the nakshatras and the Nakshatra Sutras. Big ups to Vic. So here we have the true nakshatra name, and then we have this first word in pink letters is the deity, which rules the nakshatra in classical Vedic literature. There's always a deity that's going to rule every nakshatra. Now, in white, we have a name that's given to the nakshatra. Now, in this case, in the case of Pushya, they use a different name. Sometimes obscure names are used, again, to give more information about the nakshatra, to have more understanding of what is trying to be described by the nakshatra, for the sake and interest, again, of expediency. Then we have the yellow word is what we call the foundation from above. That's what's needed for this nakshatra to function properly. And the word padastad, pada meaning up, like parachute, so that shows that this is this thing that stands above. And when this nakshatra has the yellow word standing above it, it can produce the blue word. And that's the foundation below. It's what the nakshatra desires to produce from what it receives. So it receives the yellow word, padastat, and it produces the blue word, which we indicate by avastat. So padastat and avastat always stay the same. It's the other 4 that will actually change in each sutra. Right? Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's start digging into our Mula Nakshatra Sutra. Hey, Elizabethany. Nice to see you. Yes, whoops. So, first thing what we're going to do, and this is what I recommend to everybody, truly, if you really get into Vedic sutras, if you get into Vedic consciousness, your best thing to do whenever studying anything is to first, all the commentaries we read, all the videos you watch here, like me describing these things in the way that I can, it's only ever going to be a supplement to the meditative work that you do with your own nakshatra. I highly recommend, if you're into the nakshatras, I also especially recommend if you've got Rahu and Ketu in a certain nakshatra, to meditate, to find time to go out into a forest, have a fire by yourself, and then just take the time to meditate, clear your mind, and then do your Rahu Ketu Nakshatra Sutra. Be amazed at what clarity comes to you when you do that. But even for somebody with the moon there, with the Lagna there, for anybody interested in Mula Nakshatra, this is the source of it. Now, Vic Dicara and his students created a cool a vocal rendition of how to speak this nakshatra. You can find it on Vic's website, and you can find it on his YouTube channel. You just look up Vic Dicara 27 Nakshatra. You'd probably find it that way. Now, I'm going to do my best to share this sutra and to vocalize it. And you'll have to excuse anything that I don't get exactly right here, but we're going to do our best with it. I've been getting into Sanskrit, and I love to do this kind of thing. But this is a long one, so let's see if we can do it. Feel free to join in if you feel like it. Om Nirrti Mula Varhani Pratibhanjantaha Parastad Pratishrinanto Vastat. Om Nirrti Mula Varhani Pratibhanjantaha Parastat Pratishrinyanto Vastat. There's a few funny things in here. Whenever you see a little dot underneath an R, it's going to be Re. When you see an H in front of a consonant, you've got to pronounce the H, like Pratibha. That little squiggly above the N might be similar to what it is in Spanish. I'm not sure about that one, though. Pratibhanjantaha. When you have a little dot underneath an H, it has a H, like, so you don't just H, you also have the there. And then Pratishrinyanto. I'm pretty sure that nyanto, if I remember correctly, there's a just like in Spanish, this little squiggle. Nya, right? Om Nirrti Mula Varhani Pratibhanjantaha Parastad Pratishrinyanto Vastat. So that is our Mula Nakshatra Sutra from the Taittiriya Brahmana. So this is it. This is the thing. This is the iceberg. Now, let's start pulling from the iceberg to see if we can glean some knowledge and information and understanding of what's being said here. Now, I should have prepared this already, and I guess I didn't. So, just to let everybody know, I'm going to go on google.ca, energies of the 27 nakshatras. Next. So what you do is you go to vedicastrology.net, and then you can click here to download Ernst Wilhelm's Energies of the 27 Nakshatras. and he'll give you this little PDF. And this is where I've taken from this PDF and placed it here. Ernst gives this book out for free because God bless him, he just wants this knowledge to get out there. Now, between Ernst Wilhelm and Vic Dicara, because we are reading from two different sources here, we're reading first from Ernst's PDF. I should have the actual thing here. Might just be a better way of doing this. Here we go. So it looks like this. I'm going to go to this PDF. And when you find it, it's going to take on this picture. Energies of the 27 lunar mansions, including a new translation of the Nakshatra Sutras from the Taittiriya Brahmana. And then it shows this picture, I believe, of probably the sun, because it's got all those horses. Don't quote me on it. Surya. So that is Ernst's translation of the Nakshatra Sutras. Ernst Wilhelm is decidedly more what we like to call enigmatic with how he describes the Nakshatra Sutras. He just gets right to the core of it. He doesn't translate it for us. So when you read Ernst's version of it, it seems like he doesn't Englishify it. He doesn't strive to make it make sense in English. Because when you take an original thing and you smooth it out into the English meaning and language, sometimes the English can take away from the essence of it. But I like both of these. Vic Dicara, as we're going to read later, he Englishifies things. He takes it and says, well, this is what I think the Nakshatra Sutra is saying. That can be very useful because Vic is good. He's good. He's done a lot of work with these nakshatras. But I like throwing in Ernst's as well to get it's like the piece of rock before you've sifted it. And then with Vic Dicara, you get to sift it. But it's nice to see the rock, the raw ore, throughout the whole process. So that's what Ernst is giving us here. So he's kind of breaking down each word in the sutra. So, first we have Nirrti, and this kind of means for Nirrti, for the without motion one, goddess of dissolution and destruction. So, Ernst is saying that we're going to read a deeper translation from Vic Dicara, but there's an implication here of one being without motion, the dense, dark stillness of Kali Ma, of Nirrti, also known as the goddess of dissolution and destruction. So we know Nirrti is the name of the goddess. So Nirrti is grammatically making this statement say, for Nirrti, and then Mula Varhani. So Mula Varhani is describing, it's the name of this nakshatra, and it is describing kind of what the deity Nirrti is doing with this nakshatra. So for Nirrti, the goddess of dissolution and destruction, Mula Varhani. Now this is a plural word. It means uprootings, literally pulled out roots. So what we have is these little plants or herbs that have been pulled out. Uprootings is a very good translation. Again, this is Ernst. That's not even a right English word, but that's what's cool about Ernst's thing, is that he goes beyond grammar and just hits you with this dense core of the meaning of the word. So Nirrti is uprootings. It's pulled out roots. And then we have Pratibhanjantaha, and that's sort of like fracturing. One simple word that Ernst uses here, which is interesting. He doesn't usually say it so succinctly. But what we have is what's needed above in order for this nakshatra to work properly is fracturing. So Mula Nakshatra and natives of Mula need to do a sort of fracturing or experience a sort of fracturing in order for things to be pratishranyantaha, which means breaking into pieces. The fracturing that Mula attracts breaks things into pieces, and that is the result that we receive below. So in total, the enigmatic phrase from Ernst reads, the uprootings for Nirrti, the goddess without motion, is fracturing from above and breaking into pieces from below. So we really see the dissolution, the breaking up, the non-singularity, the destructiveness, the breaking apart that this goddess represents and that this nakshatra represents. So now we've kind of taken it from Ernst again and seen a good picture of what Ernst thinks about this nakshatra. Now we're going to start digging into what Vic Dicara describes through his, again, all of this comes from the Nakshatra Sutras course available at vicdicara.com. That's where I'm getting all these very useful translations from Vic Dicara. So, Nirrti, Nirrit itself just means untruth. So Nirrti or Nirrti, remember that the Nirrti is basically saying that we are referencing the goddess herself. But the word Nirrit itself just means untruth. It can mean deception or unreality. It's an interesting sort of difference with Ernst and Vic here. But there is a similarity. Nirrti being the goddess of dissolution and destruction, Nirrit, according to Vic, is described as untruth, deception, unreality. It's interesting how destruction from one way can become unreality in another, because there is an eternal, infinite reality and truth. And Nirrti is the destroyer of that, or at least the experience of being removed from that. So deception and unreality, not seeing the truth, is the destruction of what is real. I'm just kind of, surmising here in my own way. But digging into Vic's thing, it says Nirrit, the root of it means untruth, deception, unreality. Now Mula or Mulau, it essentially means that something has two roots. It's forked, it's branched, it's split, which is very interesting. So there's this forked nature to it. There's either a good or a bad, there's duality, there's a branching here. Now the word arhani that relates with Mula Varhani, arhani means honorable, interestingly enough. So Mula Varhani altogether has a very interesting implication that, again, we're going to dig deeper into it as we get into Vic Dicara's deeper writings on this. He actually, in his so this sutra, the Nakshatra Sutras course, Vic was working out his language. He's going to tie it together in a different way by describing Varhani as relating to destroyer. So again, it's this cutting and uprooting of lies. So we have to keep that in mind as we digest what's being defined by Mula Varhani. But as what's moving on, the next word we have is pratibhanj. And then it can also have the a or antaha. Pratibhanj. So the word that's kind of given is a disturbance, a disruption, a mutual disrupting of something. And it goes to show that usually the disturbance that Mula feels is going to be disturbing to Mula as well as the other person or whatever it's disrupting. The disruption is mutual. It's kind of coming from two different places, two different ways. And of course, this is the word that that Ernst has described as fracturing. disturbance, disruption. And then, of course, then we also have Pratishran. And then to add, there's more grammar that you can have the Antaha. And just like with Jesta's nakshatra, what is being described here is an attack or some kind of destruction. To attack, destroy, or kill. So we can see here that where there is untruth or some kind of deception, some kind of destructive unreality, Mula is going to see the roots of it, going to understand and put in place what those roots are in that person, in that situation, and to see what is causing a situation, to see the deep roots of something, especially through that Dhatu, Mula being a mineral nakshatra, seeing the formulative actions and efforts and objective reality that is causing a moment to happen, causing a person to act away, causing a company to come together, causing an enterprise, causing a political decision. All of these things, the Mula native is going to see the untruth in it and figure out what those roots are. And then it's going to disturb and disrupt the thing, because they can always find some ugly thing to purge from any situation. And this will bring attacks and destruction. But usually what this means is that when the Mula person disrupts the thing, and basically by disrupting it, they'll probably make whatever they're pointing their finger at be disturbed or disrupted. And this will cause them to attack. And that attack, as that retaliation, will cause Mula to attack, and now Mula is justified in attacking. It's almost very similar to Jesta in a certain way, but a little bit different. It's operating on very different reasons. So Mula is good at exposing and destroying deceptions and unrealities. These people are good researchers, detectives, psychologists, and spiritualists. But of course, the negative aspect of Mula is that they can be an irritating, combative troublemaker. And that's how people often perceive them. They're just stirring the pot, causing trouble for the sake of causing trouble. But we know through the coyote consciousness of divinity, of the South American traditions, the trickster energy is kind of related to Mula. Although they're not really tricksters, I wouldn't call them coyote energy. The reason I brought up coyote is because coyote is known for saying you got to do what you got to do for the sake of truth, even if it's wily or whatever, But coyote can be a trickster. Mula is not necessarily a trickster. Mula is just serious to the bone and just wants everybody to recognize that, hey, if I'm in the room, y'all better be paying attention, dotting your T's, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, making sure that everything's all in alignment and everyone's being real and authentic. And if anybody's not, I'm probably just going to naturally speak to it because it stresses me out to see anything that is wibbing and wubbing with inauthenticity. Something that's got a crack in their mirror. Mula would just come along and be like, and just tap, tap, tap that crack until the whole mirror disappears. And everyone's like, oh man, we had this thing going on. And Mula is usually like, it was going to break anyway. I just made us all be aware of what is happening here. So this is the nature of Mula, is that, again, everything has the capacity to be used righteously and well. But Mula does have to take on a tough character, a tough energy. It's a tough and important energy, Now, we're going to bring this all together. Now, sage advice, you've just given me a question. And what the heck? Let's just quickly read it. So you've got chart lord Mercury in Mula. It's conjunct the moon in the 7th. Is unconventional relationships a theme with this placement? Well, sage advice, unconventional relationships is a theme with the moon conjunct Mercury in the 7th house. Mercury is probably having a hard time there in the 7th house. But as far as relationships, as being unconventional relationships being a theme with the moon conjunct Mercury in Mula, I mean, Mercury and moon together can make anything a little bit fuzzy and funky. If the moon is in Mula, what you've got to be wary of is the fact that you'll probably be very interested in, you got to be careful of jealousy with a situation like that. Use your Mercury is in the 7th house, might be difficult to convey and communicate honestly and truly, or to communicate trust, to develop mutual trust with you and your partner. So the Mula in you is always going to want to get to the root of things. And when your partner is doing some kind of unconventional relationship thing, you're going to want to get to the bottom of it. And that can cause trouble there. But just plain old moon and Mercury together in Mula, I wouldn't necessarily say that the nakshatra would have anything to do with unconventionality in relationships. Mula, I mean, it can go any way. You could probably be like a polyamorous person, or anybody can be anything, but you're going to operate through the understanding of your nakshatra as you deal with it. Unconventional relationships can work, again, for anybody. The Mula Nakshatra is just going to bring some desire for honesty, showing up and demanding that people say what's happening when it's going on with no lies, so that you're not left jealously pondering, wasting your whole life pondering what your partner is lying to you about. That would be very annoying. So that's the best answer I could give you there, sage advice. I hope that's useful for you, because you've given me a tip there, and I appreciate it very dearly. So let's finish up on what we're discussing here with Mula. Now, Ernst, I always say Ernst, Vic is giving us 2 definitions here. This first one in the blue comes from his Nakshatra Sutra's course. And when he was doing that, he often expanded it a bit more like Ernst does into this bigger picture. And then Vic gives us a second definition of the same thing, saying it in a different way, and he condenses it. So this second one is coming from the book that we're going to be reading soon. So let's look at our 2 definitions of this whole Nakshatra Sutra. The first one, Vic says, the honorable annihilatrix needs mutual agitation to cause mutual agitation of the tangled roots of untruth. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That really is a very wordy, and I can see why he's further condensed it, but I like this wordy version because it really says it. The honorable annihilatrix. That's what we have to understand, is that it's an annihilatrix, which everyone's like gets it. It's Kalima, like it's black, it's biting heads off, like it's raw, it's hard, it's gonna get to the truth no matter what. But we have a definition here of it being honorable. Although Vic Dicara later on changes a little bit of how he describes the word varhani. It makes it more into something destructive. But I like this because it gives us the sense that, again, every nakshatra has its place, every deity has their place. There's a reason why Nirrti, the annihilatrix, exists, and can even cause bliss for the person who is this thing. So Nirrti needs mutual agitation. It needs to experience mutual agitation in itself. And that's usually where Mula, Mula is not going around necessarily trying to blow holes in every single problem that has nothing to do with it. It's when Mula finds something that is really messing with itself, with its own life. There's an agitation within Mula that they need to just express. And they actually, this is the thing about them, is that this is the padistat. is mutual agitation. This mutual crushing, right? Pratibhanjantaha is the padastat, meaning that they are going to mutually experience these challenges, these frustrations, these agitations. But they actually do, that's an energy that allows them to produce pratishranyanto, which is mutual agitation, annihilation of the tangled roots of untruth. In other words, this person needs to experience agitating untruth in their life, and they like to, because it's like, now I can finally, they love, these are people who will walk through a field of thorns and say, good, now I've got some thorns to unpluck. You ever seen on The Simpsons with Ned Flanders? These are not Ned Flanders people. They're very opposite. They just go into every little annoying thing. But, Ned Flanders is, they're trying to make this character Ned Flanders. He never gets angry. So they're trying to, you must be angry at some things. Like what about mosquito bites? Everybody hates mosquito bites. And Ned Flanders is like, mosquito bites? They're sure fun to scratch. Satisfying. So it's kind of like that, where not in the character, but Mula is almost looking for things to scratch. For they get energy out of pulling poison out of things. They are the root herb that's bitter, but does its work to flush out toxins. They're looking to flush out these toxins. They're looking to cause mutual agitation in order to annihilate the tangled roots of untruth. So that's a cool definition. Now, Vic Dicara squishes it in a little bit in his book, The Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology. He says, destroying the roots of untruth needs mutual crushing for mutual annihilation. It's especially when Mula is pointing something out to somebody or to everybody. Have you guys noticed this person's doing this? When the person's like, how dare you? How dare you say that to me? And Mula's like, why? Does that bug you? What's so frustrating about it? If it was not true, it wouldn't bother you. So what's the deal? So Mula, when they create a response, when they can see the shale, the fragmenting in a person, unfortunately they're gonna chase that, because it's like a dog. This being the male dog, protective male dog nakshatra. Have you ever met a dog that gets uncomfortable and nervous around other people who are also nervous? A dog, I can be kind of like this. I've got a bit of dog trauma in my life. So when I see a big dog, no matter how relaxed I am, those things can feel my heart beating, and they get nervous with me, also because I have big hair. So dogs who get nervous around nervous people, I can bring that out of them, and then they're triggered, and now we have this thing happening. So Mula can be kind of like this, where they get nervous when other people get nervous about something. Like, why are you nervous about this thing? Is it because of this? So that's part of what Mula is seeking to do. So they're essentially, nobody should be nervous about anything. If everyone is doing what's right, if they're a cop, they can be a cop. Although that's not the right way to say it. But they can have this energy of, if everybody was not nervous and everybody was cool, then there would be nothing to make me nervous, and that's where I'm looking to be. But of course, due to human life, there will always be something to make somebody nervous, and there will always, therefore, be something to make Mula nervous. So part of their energy is that they should keep in mind, not everybody is, sometimes people have to hide things. Sometimes people have to, their mom just died, or they just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or they just had to do some despicable, frustrating thing. And then they come to work and they're frowning, and Mula says, oh, hey, how's it going? It mentions something about their dad, and they're all frowning all of a sudden. Now Mula's nervous. What is that? Why does that frustrate you? Why does it frustrate you for me to talk about your dad? Person's like, because my dad just fucking died. okay? And Mula's like, oh, my bad. You know, like, so Mula sometimes has to be aware that they don't have to stick their nose into everything. But this is part of their nature. It's part of who they are. Mula at that point would say, oh, your father just died. I'm sorry to hear that. It's good that you are learning to talk about it. It's like, yeah, I'm talking about it against my will right now because you asked about it. But Mula would be like, well, it's still good to. You know, because Mula does do this. It just brings out the pimple, brings it to the top. You want that inside your body? No. Get it out. Right? So there is a goodness to it. We have to remember this. I'm just now looking at my comments here. Awesome. I'm glad that advice worked for you, Sage Advice. So, now we've talked quite a bit about Mula in a sort of easygoing, natural way. Let's dig a little bit into the experts on the subject. In particular, we're now going to be digging into Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology, by our boy Vic Dicara. I'm very, very happy, very proud to be able to convey to the world the writings of Vic Dicara. He's sweet because I've mentioned to him that I'm interested in talking about the nakshatras and using his book and his source and his sutras and his courses as sort of grist for my mill. And Vic's like, do it. Talk about the nakshatras. That's what we're here for. Plus, hopefully, I'm giving you guys the sense that I'm only digesting the hard work that Vic and Ernst have done. And I would highly recommend you pay attention to their work as a deep core of this stuff, because it's good too. You know, I'm ideally promoting my teachers, my gurus at this junction, right? But I digress. Don't feel obligated, but just remember that I'm only picking up on a piece of gum that someone's already chewed. So, again, let's have one more peek, because, you know, what we're going to read here is essentially what we've just read. You can even see it here. Destroying the roots of untruth needs mutual crushing for mutual annihilations. It's destroying the roots of untruth, if I said that hopefully the right way. It's Nirrti Mula Varhani. Interestingly, now Vic has taken a turn and is kind of using the word Varhani in the sense of being this thing that destroys. It's part of that honorable. The word honorable was used previously. Now Vic is taking a turn and using it to describe as destructive, destroying. So Mula is the roots and Nirrti is the untruth. And Varhani is the destroying of it. Nirrti Mula Varhani, destroying the roots of truth. So let's dig into this a little bit. Hello, Sandra. Glad to hear that you're learning Vedic and that you're listening to Ernst Wilhelm. Very important guy. Now, let's begin by discussing Nirrti. One of the central parts of this word is rita, which means real. Right? When we see the word Nirrti, the RTI, the riti, it's the root of it is a Sanskrit word rita, and it means real. Now, when you add nir, N-I-R, to the word rita, what you get is Nirrti, or Nirrita, which means unreal. Nir is a negating word, like non, like no, right? Nir. So Nirrita is not real. So that's what Nirrti is. It's unreal. Nir also indicates removed. So the word implies one who removes things from reality, a destroyer. It is a name for the goddess of destruction. Very interesting. Nirrti. And Rita meaning real. It's the remover of things from reality. Very interesting. Now, Rita doesn't just mean real, it also means true. So, Nirrti denotes the opposite of truth, which is lies. The goddess named Nirrti has mastery over all things that are illusory, delusive, false, and unreal. It's interesting that this nakshatra is all about removing that, dealing with that, getting to the roots of it through Mula. So this informs us that the symbolism of Mula Nakshatra is focused on truth and lies, reality and unreality. It's a very psychedelic thing to understand that Kali Ma, who is often regarded as being associated with Nirrti, is the spouse of Shiva, who is ultimate absolute truth. This is why Kali Ma and Shiva are important together. They're considered as being in tow with each other. And in fact, Nirrti, the animal, yoni animal, of Mula Nakshatra, the sexual compatibility yoni animal used in marriage assessment for Mula, is the male dog. And for Ardra, the sexual yoni animal is the female dog. Interestingly, Ardra is Shiva. And Mula Nakshatra is ruled by Nirrti. So they're both the dog nakshatras, and they work well, allegedly, in marriage. So we can see that the Shiva energy of absolute truth, getting to the real core of things, beyond all illusion, is in tow as the spouse of Kali Ma. You'd think that they'd be strange bedfellows. I'm sure that they have a fight or two in their shenanigans, but they are spouses. And it shows again that Nirrti and Mula, the one who would pull out and reveal the darkness of untruth, is a very key player in discovering truth. I'm going to say this over and over again because people don't give Mula Nakshatra enough credit, in my opinion, right? Because every nakshatra can be used benevolently. So next we have the word Mula. And the word Mula, as we've already seen, it indicates the origin and foundation of something. For example, Mula is very often used to refer to the roots of trees. Here, we are talking about the roots of lies and delusions, fabrications, manufactured falsities. Nirrti Mula literally means the roots serving the tree of lies. Nirrti Mula, the roots of the tree of lies. Now Varhani, again, Vic has described this as now being the destroyer. The word Varhani, which means destroyer, describes goddess Nirrti as the cutter and uprooter of the roots of lies. And this works well with Mula Varhani, as Ernst Wilhelm described it, remember, is uprootings, because Mula is root, and then Varhani is pulling up the roots, pulling out the roots. Uprootings, plural, is a good way to put the Mula Varhani in total. So Vic describes Varhani as meaning the destroyer, and it describes goddess Nirrti as being the cutter and uprooter of the roots of lies. Mula Nakshatra's symbolism revolves around exposing lies to uproot and destroy them, to stop them from rooting further. So now let's next look up our next word in this Nakshatra Sutra. That's pratibhanjantaha. As we can see here. Now, bhanjana means to strike, hit, crush, and destroy. To critical hit, to give someone a real good bop with something. Now, that's the root of this word is bhanjana. Now, the word prati, as we can see here, the word prati is a sort of a prefix on the word bhanjantaha. So having prati as a prefix indicates mutual strikes going back and forth. Pratibhanjana. Here, the word is actually plural. Lies seldom, if ever, remain singular. They proliferate. So this is important because the proliferation of lies causes them to contradict each other. And this weakens and eventually destroys, they eventually weaken and destroy each other in their context with each other. So pratibhanjantaha really means attacking each other. It's the lies themselves really are. This is what the nakshatra is saying, is that, remember, this is Nirrti, Mula Varhani. Pratibhanjana means that the lies are coming into contradiction with each other. You know, someone's giving an alibi. Oh, I woke up at 10 in the morning and I watched the BT television. You know, if they're telling the police officer, I remember I was up at 10 in the morning and I was watching BT television. Or, you know, let's say I woke up at 8 in the morning. I was watching BT television. I remember it. And then the police officer says, wait a minute, BT television doesn't start until 10 in the morning. And the person's like, you know, they got caught in this contradiction. Now their lies are contradicting themselves. This is what Mula looks for. Mula needs that pratibhanjana as its parastat. Right? Pratibhanjantaha. Parastat. So this is a part of what Vic is describing as Mula uprooting these lies, is that they contradict themselves. They attack each other. The prefix prati in pratibhanjantaha also implies that Mula's attacks are not unprovoked or undeserved. Mula does not strike out at the innocent and truthful. It only strikes in retaliation at the lies which have tried to strike it. Especially if anybody's got significant Mula Nakshatra placements and they're a politician, someone will come along and, you know, if there's any lies said about them, like we see it all the time in politics. You know, I don't even have to bring up the election and all the things going on in American politics right now. And Canadian politics too. I'm Canadian. We see it all the time. But, you know, there are times when a person doesn't necessarily need to dig into another person's lies. One person says all these lies. Sometimes that person will just be like, yeah, this person said all these lies, but whatever. Here's my position. Mula is probably the type of person who would say, well, the reason he said that lie, which is a lie, is he said that because he's also got this going on. You know, it's a projection of him. So Mula will point out, oh, funny for you to call me this because you've done that very same thing. So, you know, oftentimes people will make a lie and project something and point something out It's like Jesus said, pull the log out of your own eye before you try to pull out the speck in your neighbor's eye, right? So Mula sometimes will only, they're not looking to pull out specks in people's eyes. They're looking for when Mula is essentially Jesus in this moment saying, before you pull out the speck in my eye, you happen to have a log of the same type in your own eye. So, and they'll point that out, right? I digress. Mula's attacks are not unprovoked or undeserved. They don't strike out at the innocent and truthful. It strikes in retaliation at the lies which have tried to strike it. So when something has come about, when Mula senses that someone is fabricating something or saying something about Mula, that's just what Mula needs to produce, right? Pratishrinana, as Vic is describing it. Or in other words, pratishrinanto. Again, the grammar in Sanskrit can be a bit funny. So it's these lies thrown at Mula, which it needs in order to have the grist and the guts to throw at the other person. Remember, these Nakshatra Sutras teach us lessons. This teaches us about politics. It teaches us not just for a Mula native, but for all of us. When lies are thrown at us, that's the opportunity for us to engage in pratishrinana or pratishrinanto. Now let's look at the guts of this word. The word shrina was also used in the previous nakshatra of Jesta. So it shows that this is a heavy, dark part of the nakshatras, Jesta and Mula. Here, just like with Jesta, the word shrina means to attack, to destroy, to kill, etc. Now, here where we've got the plural use of shrinanto, let me just check that I've got that quite right. Yeah, so shrinanto implies a plural case. It indicates that lies multiply and proliferate, then they start bumping into each other, cracking one another, and eventually annihilating each other. And the prati, again, represents this mutual unfurling. So it does go to say that Mula sometimes, when they'll get into these projection fights of lies with another person, that will deteriorate the Mula person. Anybody with any planets condensed in Mula are going to find that they're going to get into mudslinging fights. They attract them. And other people are going to sling mud, sling lies, and they're going to have to pull themselves out of it by telling about this person is saying these lies for this reason. And if they don't, then they're going to get taken down. So then they have to sling mud too. Not necessarily to lie, but to just be honest and speak to the atrocity of the lies that are being conveyed. And it'll always make the Mula person look bad too. It'll always make them look like they're also in this lying thing. Even if they've been true to the point right from the beginning, it's still not going to be a great look on them. And Mula, unfortunately, Mula Nakshatra can attract this. And unfortunately, this is at some level what side their bread is buttered on. Because they're really good at keeping their own bill clean, typically, and pointing out the things that are messed up about that other person. The tricky part is when it comes to personal things that Mula has a hard time controlling. For example, Mula could be a great judge or a detective or a politician, but let's say they have an alcohol problem. That has nothing to do with their politics. You can be a politician and be an alcoholic, and you could be talking about something that has nothing to do with your personal thing, but you're pointing out these lies in the other person, saying you have these bad character qualities that are relevant to the discussion. Then the other person would say, well, coming from an alcoholic, that's not a big deal. And Mula would be like, that's not fair. That is not fair. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But it'll still make Mula look bad. The person can easily, use Mula's own medicine against it, but in the wrong way. Mula typically will try to use it in the right way for the right reasons, but nobody's perfect. Mula will have cracks in their own facade, in their own person, because everybody does. And that's why Mula can easily get dragged into the mud by this nakshatra nature, right? It's unfortunate and annoying, but that's just sometimes how the nakshatras go. So, I digress. In summary, what we read is that Mula's motive is to annihilate lies and untruth. Untruth being the main critical thing. It's Nirrti Mula Varhani. By uprooting and exposing how the lies contradict one another, Pratibhanjantaha, and thus invalidate and destroy each other, Pratishrinana. So, that was the guts of our nakshatra interpretation. Now, let's start getting into interpreting the planets and the nodes inside of the nakshatra of Mula. This is one of my favorite parts. I especially love digging into the Rahu and Ketu thing. I'm going to say it and mention it as we go along. Let's see how we do here with this part of our video. Now first we're going to talk about the interpreting the planets in Mula Nakshatra. Certain planets are going to do better and certain planets are going to do worse. If I have it pegged, yeah, the sharper planets are going to do well here. It's not as welcome when softer planets and relationship-oriented planets are hanging out here. Now, the sun is technically a malefic planet. Malefics generally do well, and benefics generally don't do well. But the sun is still a malefic, but it's not as easy with this. So let's dig through. Let's go through them all. Mula is very welcome. Mula is very welcome and useful wherever and whenever we need to dig below the surface, cut through lies, and uncover the real truth. So thus, it is very supportive of truth seekers, detectives, researchers, scientists, and so on. Sharp and deep planets here, it's particularly Mars, both of the nodes, and Saturn, tend to bring out this potential, this positive potential of digging deep, seeking the truth, finding what's going on at the bottom line of things, and using the malefic edge to dig fearlessly into whatever it is that needs to be discovered and found. And what we read is that Rahu is especially powerful here. So this is a good nakshatra to have the nodes in. And we're going to discuss that. I'm going to lean into that as we begin to discuss Rahu and Ketu in the sign of Mula. But before we do, let's remember to read that Mula is not so welcome where compliance and conformity is called for, as in many familial and relationship situations. Because Mula finds that it needs to shake things up and dig into forbidden places. Again, this is somebody who, having one of these softer communication and relationship planets, are going to be digging their nose where it doesn't need to be dug. There might be jealousy issues, especially. Even jealousy and friendship with Mercury. So the softer and more relationship-oriented planets in Mula, it's Venus, the Moon, and Mercury. These can indicate these sorts of challenges. They're digging into forbidden places with their partner. They're playing cop in ways that are not actually serving the partner's trust, the mutual trust in the relationship. So we have to be careful, even with the moon. The moon here can indicate somebody who is trying to be at their natural soul self, and they have to be Mula in order to feel natural and comfortable. So being with a Mula person can be a little bit like being with like a judge or a cop or somebody who is hard-lined, making sure everyone is in order and tip-top shape in their emotional realm, in their relationship, which can be annoying, but it is your energy if you have this, and it can be understood and used benevolently and benefically. You would especially just need to have a partner who appreciates that. And there are plenty of nakshatras, such as Ardra and others, who will understand your intention and where you're coming from and appreciate it, right? There's someone for everyone out there. So this is something to keep in mind. TS seems to be a little bit confirming what we're saying here. It's cool. I'm seeing some funny comments here. Tia says her sister always says she's judgmental and that she can be right. You know, this consciousness can kind of happen. But there's a positive place for everything in every planet. We just have to take the good with the negative, mitigate the negative as much as we can, and complement the positive. But don't do that at the expense of your nature. If you're a Mula moon, you might have this nature in you that you have to express. Listen within your heart. That's why meditation ultimately is the ultimate way of dealing with any nakshatra placement. Because positive, spiritual, positive vibrations only people might really get on a Mula Nakshatra person's nerves, especially because Mula Nakshatra is going to see most times when anybody is falsely applying spiritual projectionism bullshit, you know, positive vibes only, it usually means that they're hiding something. They're trying to get away from the negative energy that moves through us as naturally as toxins move downriver in order to bring it back to the ocean to be purified. Everybody needs to be authentic. That's the best thing you could be. And when you have to have a moment of fear, of suspicion of your partner, and it makes you uncomfortable, say it, express it, get it through, get it out, spill out that poison, pop that pimple. The sooner you do it, the sooner you and your partner will feel better about this thing you've been harboring. It can be annoying for Mula Nakshatra to do so, but in the end, it's better than ignoring your authentic expression, because that's going to blow up, and then you're just going to hold it all in, you know, because there are good qualities to you, but these negative qualities of suspicion, a little bit of jealousy, you know, kind of feeling the person out to see if they're all in order, you know, those can be annoying qualities to you and your partner. But if it's part of who you are, your good qualities will shine through too. So don't be afraid to be who you are. Don't be afraid of the negative energy of Mula. But talk with your partner, communicate, ask for help. Ask if it's being too overbearing. And when it is, explain that I have to get some of it out and work on it together. It's better for me to tell you this than for me to just fake. You guys would know. You Mula people would know if I was just saying anything other than the facts here. You guys want to hear the fucking dirt, and here it is. There is dirt to be smelled. But so does every nakshatra. And that's probably the best way I could convey this. And again, Venus, Moon, Mercury indicate challenges and relationships and these sorts of things. It's only one planet in the nakshatra, in your whole schema. Always make sure to keep in mind that there will always be positives. There will always be things that you balance out with any negative placement. And this isn't a strictly negative placement because the moon doesn't really have any enemies. The moon is itself. The moon can be even happy in a negative nakshatra like Mula. It does have a negative tone, but it's still your moon. It's still your soul. It's still a necessary part of your happiness. I think I could ring around that posy for forever, but I think it's good for us to keep moving forward here. The Sun and Jupiter in Mula can also actually tend to indicate the more challenging side of this nakshatra, suggesting frequent or significant clashes with authorities, who typically establish and enforce what is normalized as true, real, lawful, moral, and so on. So the sun especially being like relating to the government and the nation, the chief. The sun is always going to see, again, cracks in a facade. You know, Mula Sun and Mula Jupiter can be almost overly politically passionate people who are very passionate about seeing the cracks in the political sphere and trying to speak to those cracks, speak to the fractures in the foundation, speak to the lies. And, you know, again, just like it's like a father who's an alcoholic, but he's doing his best to raise his kids. He might be an alcoholic and he's maybe doing some bad things. Like, if they're really bad, they're worth speaking to. But if he's just an alcoholic, it's his own vice. It stops him from fully loving his children and his wife, but it's his vice, you know. A sun and Jupiter and Mula person might like call the authorities on their father or something like that, because like this guy is an alcoholic and that's it. He, you know, and they could come take him away. But if he's not being abusive, if he's doing what a good father has to do, he's just got this vice that he keeps inside, it would almost be not the right thing necessarily for the Mula to make him be taken away by the authorities. That would show in a personal thing in the Mula person. I digress. You know, in the same way, sometimes in politics, the people on top of things they're bad and they do some bad fucked up shit. You know, Mula comes along and points out all the lies, but Mula is not an expert at like, okay, so what are we going to do then? If we know our political leader at present, he's got these ugly things going on. Do you want to be the leader? No, Mula is not necessarily made to be a leader. It's just made to be that negative naysayer. I can't put it that way because it's not always negative. But it does point out these lies. And Sun and Jupiter sometimes will be so expansive, like I see it and I'm just gonna say it. I have faith that talking about this lie it's my dharma and it's gonna bring me farther in life, and it only ends up to possibly ruin a good thing, or, you know, worse, have them be roughed around by authorities who are grab them by the head and say, hey, shut up or we're gonna make you disappear. I don't know what you think of that. If you've got Sun and Jupiter and Mula, and maybe you're like, fuck it, I wouldn't care because it would be the true thing to do. But I digress. It's an ethically tricky pot to stir with the Sun and Jupiter and Mula, as Vic has described here. But it's part of who you are. Feel it out. Try not to let yourself get endangered, you know, because you could be just a mosquito that the authorities swat with Sun and Jupiter in Mula. You come out as this person everybody knows you are this person who's going to cause this big unveiling, a journalist who's going to unveil this big thing, and the authorities just swat you, make you disappear, and now you're never heard from again. What you should have done is more Mars or Saturn or the nodes in Mula, which works cleverly with the poisoners to unveil the truth in the proper way to the right people so that your hands are clean as a journalist and you get to continue doing your work without being swatted by the authorities like a mosquito. Mars, Saturn, and the nodes are going to tend towards that kind of genius. So, I'm glad I got to talk about that a little bit. I always love talking about these interpretations of planets in the nakshatras. Now, we are next going to be continuing our interpretations. We're going to be discussing what it's like when you have Rahu and Ketu in the sign, in the nakshatra of Mula. Now, as we've just read, the first thing we can see is that, of course, Mula is very welcome and useful wherever and whenever we need to dig below the surface, cut through lies, and uncover the real truth of things. So it's supportive of truth seekers, detectives, researchers, scientists, and so on. So sharp and deep planets like Mars, the nodes, and Saturn tend to bring out this potential. Rahu is especially powerful here. That's what we've read. Now, we're going to talk about Rahu, but as always, I first like to talk about Ketu, because Ketu is the root. Having Ketu in Mula is a very interesting thing. It relates, both of these relate to roots in a strong way. Ketu is our root. It's our past lives, and it is essentially a root that needs to get purged. Esoterically speaking, we would not have incarnated on Earth unless we had karma to work out. We come here to work out our karma, to come back into a state of pure self-realization and bliss, purity, by purging that which is untrue and realizing that which is real and true and sattvic, satya. Ketu is that thing for all of us. So to have Ketu in Mula, there's an interesting signification there. You might find yourself cracking very deeply into the reasons why you keep incarnating in the first place. What is it in your soul, your past lives, your genetics that is not yet purified and that keeps bringing you here? It's interesting enough that, again, Vic Dicara doesn't like using the Vimshottari Lord. The Vimshottari Lord is the planet that experiences, the first Mahadasha when you were born with the moon in this nakshatra. If you're born in Mula Nakshatra, the first dasha you experience is Ketu. So there is, again, Vic Dicara wouldn't say that Ketu is in the energy of this nakshatra. Ernst is kind of more open to it. It's a debatable thing. So that's why I'm not going to say too much about it. But there is a signification that Ketu is the Vimshottari Lord of Mula. I digress. So, if you have Ketu in the sign of Mula, then your Rahu is going to be in one of two places. It's going to either be in Mrigashirsha, or it's going to be in Ardra. And having Rahu in Mrigashirsha and Ardra are really quite different. To have them both be bridging, to have Mula in Ketu and Mula and Rahu. Okay, let's do them both. Let's do Ketu and Mula, Rahu in Mrigashirsha. There's going to be a desire in Mrigashirsha for diplomacy. It's a bit of a unifier. It's incapable of personal bias, Mrigashirsha. It's kind of a chameleon with no firm values. Mula is intense. So Rahu in Mrigashirsha is going to actually soften the Mula a little bit. It's going to cause them to be diplomatic. And this would be a Mula Ketu person, where the Rahu in Mrigashirsha allows you to be a politician, to have the sense of, unfolding the roots, the crack, the lies, bringing out this journalistic report on this thing that our leader did. But you're gonna do it in a way that's still gonna kind of keep you protected. It's gonna keep you feeling like, you've got Rahu in Mrigashirsha. You're looking to bring into your consciousness the reputation and the energy of one who is diplomatic, who's kind of working for everybody. And the Mula in you, the Ketu Mula, is this underdog that is working for everybody to take out these key lies and fractures in the system. So that softens things a little bit. If you have Ketu and Mula, and Rahu is in Ardra, this is a little bit more like the pure cop. Like, this is the guy who's going to kind of bust down the door, not care what it breaks on its path. It can be, you know, people will see him as kind of like someone who's way out there, stands out as being a figure of righting wrongs, fixing injustices, the Black Knight vigilante, the Batman. Ketu, Mula, Rahu, and Ardra is like Batman, you know, who's kind of taking matters into his own hands because no one else is going to do it. And he gets known as the Batman, as the Dark Knight who comes along and cleans things up and does these things that need to be done. So that's an interesting sort of take there, you know. In any case, whether Rahu is in Ardra or Mrigashirsha, just checking that I was right on that. Wherever your Rahu is, Ketu in Mula is eventually going to be overbearing. At first it's going to be overbearing with its root seeking. It's going to basically look for all superficial roots. And it's going to take away, you know, being so focused on, again, with Ketu in Mula, they've got a log in their own eye, just like we all do. And Ketu in Mula at first is going to be looking to take out the specks in other people's eye. Until they get to be about 36, the Rahu's going to turn on. Then Rahu matures at 43 for all of us. And then Ketu matures at 48. At some point, the Mula is going to have the understanding that I'm wasting my time pulling the specks out of everybody else's eye out. Now it's time for me to pull the log out of my own eye. And be the journalist that you are, you know, to be the person who is purifying the negative energy of other people. That might still be part of who you are. That might be a part of your job, part of your thing, part of your energy, part of your soul evolution. To pull that darkness energy out of other people. But this eventually won't be a projection. You won't be ignoring your own darkness by doing this. Rather, it's going to be a channel for you pulling out your own darkness. And this will especially happen depending on all the other things related to Ketu. If you've got Ketu is likely in Sagittarius at this time in the tropical zodiac. I always like to make these videos, you know, in case people decide to watch my videos 5,000 years from now. Ketu would be in a different sign, a different tropical sign. But for the sake of the example, in today's time, Mula mostly falls into Sagittarius and I think a little bit into Capricorn. So if you have to look at the Ketu sign lord, which in the case of Sagittarius would be Jupiter. If Jupiter is doing very well, then Ketu falling in Sagittarius, Mula Nakshatra, the Mula Nakshatra agenda will do better. You have to, in order for the Mula agenda to do well for any planet, you got to look at the sign dispositor. Right? That's a tight way to put it. If the sign dispositor of Ketu in Mula is doing well, then much soul work will be done. Much cleansing of the soul will be done. Much purifying work. Figuring out darkness that the soul has just been looking to purify for a long time. This incarnation and possibly the last few strings of incarnations might have been predicated on sweeping the cobwebs and the darkness out of the soul that has not been realized, that's not been focused on. And it's going to be your soul. It should be the main guts of it. But doing this with other people might be a channel for your own soul cobweb clearing with Mula, with Ketu and Mula, which eventually, essentially, you will do so much of this Mula energy, and you'll probably be frustrated by it because it'll come to you. This political mudslinging, people lying to you, you'll find that it happens to you, that other people lie to you, and you can't understand why. All these people are always lying to me all the time. And you'll slowly need to discover that there are roots of trauma or some darkness inside yourself that you've been keeping from yourself, that you have not been confronting, that you have not been facing. And as time goes on, the deeper you get into anything inside yourself that you have a hard time facing and confronting, the more other people are going to lie to you. The more that you're going to see the cracks and facades and untruths in other people, and that you'll find that you'll have people saying things about you that are untruthful, and the more frustrated you'll get about that. Because the truth is that a lot of humans just do that. A lot of humans just do that to buffer themselves up. It doesn't matter that much to anybody except for people with karma in Mula. You might be experiencing that people are going to talk. You get in a relationship with someone, and it could be the best relationship, and it's perfect, but people are going to talk. They're going to wonder, what are they like behind closed doors? Oh, I've seen this person do this. I don't know. You never know. People are going to talk, but that doesn't matter. We just keep doing our activity. But if you've got karma in Mula, it's going to be overemphasized. Why are they talking about me? It bothers you. Likely, it only bothers you because you have cobwebs left unchecked that you are not confronting within yourself. They're throwing these little distracting tennis balls at you, and you're distracted by them. But if you be zen about it, once you extract your own poisons and from your own roots, then anybody can lob anything at you, and you're not going to care. You're looking for the deeper things that are actually causing problems in the world, and not just any little frilly thing. Ketu develops this as it matures. Ketu eventually finally matures at 48, but even at age 36, your nodes are going to begin to flip on, where up to age 36, you operate very unconsciously through Ketu, through these lies. Then at 36, Rahu in its nakshatra, whether it's in Ardra or Mrigashirsha, is going to help you to take the focus out of yourself and into the true purpose of the darkness of Nirrti, which is purifying what's truly needed to be purified, the roots of all problems around you and inside you. Rahu maturing is going to cause you to pull out taking it personally that this energy is even happening, and you're just going to get over it, that this energy is here, that people are going to do things with me. And usually, sometimes they've got personal agendas, sometimes they got bigger agendas in slinging your name down into the mud. The less you take it personally, the more people are going to sense that you're just doing what you are in a benevolent way. They're going to smell that you're just this type of person who does things for the right reasons. But if you've got planets mixed up with Ketu, if you got Jupiter, or if you got any planet conjunct Ketu while Ketu is in Mula, or in the same sign, regardless, Ketu's agenda in Mula is going to get very entangled in that planet in a way that might always be there and always be difficult. At which case, the best thing that you can do is come clean with yourself and accept the mudslinging as part of reality for humans, because humans are idiots sometimes. As long as you're keeping your own karma clean, observing what's necessary in yourself, meditating, letting go of the compulsive nature of things, then you'll be able to just start doing the pratibhanjana, doing this back and forth of agitating these annoying lies or bad things or fractures in the reality. You'll be able to do it in a way that is the right ones at the right time, instead of being swamped by them and taking it all personally. Right? I hope that's helpful for Ketu and Mula people. Now let's do a switch. Let's do a little flipsy-doo-dah. We're still reading from Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology. We're looking at the interpretations now of Rahu in Mula. And it's going to be similar to what we've just given for Ketu, but I'm going to do my best to stretch it out. Now remember, Vic's interpretation of this particular position, he says that Mula is very supportive of truth seekers, detectives, researchers, scientists. Sharp and deep planets here, Mars, nodes, and Saturn, are going to bring out the positive potential of Mula as being able to be malefic, to be intelligent about how it brings about the discovering or unveiling of lies. Because the vigilante, Mula can be a bit of a vigilante. It's that male dog energy. Mula is the Dark Knight. It's Batman. It takes matters into its own hands because it knows the police can't fully do it right because they've got their corruption. It's the Dark Knight that goes and can be vigilante and take things into their own hands. But that can get people into a lot of trouble, depending on the planet. Again, we've just talked about how Sun and Jupiter can be particularly a little bit too Batman when it's in Mula and actually get it itself into trouble because it's so connected to the dharma of the Sun and Jupiter that it wants to be known as this vigilante. Now, Mars, Saturn, and the nodes are a bit different. It's okay with doing the action and it doesn't need to identify with it like Sun and Jupiter do. Now, what Vic particularly tells us is that Mars, the nodes, and Saturn bring out the potential of being an intelligent, smart vigilante who will unveil to the lies to the right people at the right time so that they can, their hands are free. They did their job as a journalist, and nobody needs to know that it was my journalism that's going to cut my head off later, or something like that. They just do it in the right way. What Vic tells us is that Rahu is especially powerful here in Mula. Rahu in Mula knows how to do the as Tia calls it, the Avenger archetype. Rahu in Mula is a particularly powerful, we got to remember that Rahu is actually one of the divine spirit. It shows an essence of our spirit. Mula, Ketu really is this misty thing that always is actually a root that we're all looking to unpluck through Rahu. So we can see why Rahu in Mula is actually a very interesting placement. Rahu is going to get to the root of things. And this could be the root of things in your external world. By helping people. This can make a great psychologist or some kind of researcher, even a medicinal practitioner who works with different bitter medicines, herbs, and poisons to help purify and purge things. Shamanic people who read energy and will use plants connected to that energy to purge out an energetic system. It's also possible that in the deeper sense, that could be a part of the Rahu Mula experience. But there's a deeper thing happening where Rahu, especially when it's positioned and placed in the right way, is very strong at seeing its own karmic hang-ups and clearing the cobwebs and the darkness in the heart and soul of this incarnation. It's possible that you've incarnated several times with Ketu in either Mrigashira or Ardra, and now Rahu is in Mula to try and get to the heart, get to the root of the falsity that your Ketu is causing, because Ketu can do this. We're too much of Ketu, we're too close to it, and so we become so enwrapped by Ketu's energy that it's hard to see it. I often talk about Ketu. It's like you're looking for your keys in this room. And you look under the couch, you look under everything, but there's this central pillar in the middle of the room that someone has tucked your keys under there. And it's so central to the room. It's like your back is up against this thing, and you're looking in 360 directions around the room with your back against that pillar. And you say, I just can't find the root. I just don't get it. There's all these parts of me that I just never get to the bottom of myself. And it's because the thing your back has been leaning on is the one central pillar in the room that you'd never thought to look under, because you're so close to Ketu. So Rahu in Mula is going to really bring out the root, find that root, almost to the point where it's such a deep discovering of your own karmic condition that, it's one thing to know something, but it's another thing to be it. And you might find that you know your karmic condition with Rahu and Mula, but you still work through it, and have to move through it. It's like, if you're, again, it's the example I can bring up, if you've got Rahu and Mula, and for whatever reason your father was an alcoholic and you picked up that alcoholism and now you're an alcoholic, and you, through life, you've learned over time that it's your alcoholism. It's something, the reason you drink alcohol is because your father was abusive or some traumatic thing happened, and now you use this to escape from it. Rahu and Mula is going to make you realize, oh, that's that thing, this trauma, this stuff, this junk that I had was what is causing me to have this behavior. But you still, you still do the behavior. You still don't necessarily go digging into your traumas because you might have other things going on. And you'll see it, and it's almost too hard to deal with. But you'll see it. That's kind of how this Rahu and Mula can work. And it can work that way in the soul, and it can probably work that way with a lot of things, of just seeing the fragmented untruths, the lies that contradict each other in any situation. But Rahu, again, knowing, with Rahu and Mula, it's going to get to the root of all the roots. It's going to see all these roots that are contradicting each other, and it's going to go to the biggest root of them all and think, what's the most important and useful way for me to use my researcher dog sniffing energy? But this also, of course, depends on all things. Rahu can get an ego in Mula, just like it can in any place. It's ultimately, as Vic Dicara has said, we know that Rahu is a good place, a good thing to have in Mula. But you can have other planets that are debilitated here. If planets are shamed by Rahu, and, if you've got Venus and Mars and Rahu all in the same sign, then the Rahu Mula Nakshatra agenda is going to be exacerbated by that starved Venus, for example, or that ashamed Venus is what that would be. You can look up Lajatadya Vashtas and that shame to know what I'm talking about there. Whenever you have a planet with a malefic and a node, it becomes ashamed. And the shame of that Venus in that situation is going to play into the Rahu and Mula narrative, where they're going to see something that has shamed them always. That's going to be a root that they see there, and they're always going to be trying to purify this root, this shame of Venus. And it might dig them into very traumatic places or whatever it is that's causing that shame in their early childhood. And this whole digging of roots thing, it's almost like they can't accept that that happened, because it might be sometimes traumas happen to us that are a root that can't really be purified and purged. And the Rahu Mula person sees that root and wants to purify it. And over time, though, they'd probably do a lot of work to let go of it energetically, spiritually, whatever. But it might be so it's embarrassing, and it might mess with things, because this is the nature of difficult planets, difficult planetary combinations with the nodes. It's got to work through that node's agenda. So I digress. You've always got to keep aware of everything in this way. Look at the whole chart. Look at everything going on with your Rahu in order to define what's going on with the Rahu and Mula Nakshatra agenda. Now, if Rahu is in Mula, then you have two possible places for your Ketu. Ketu can be in Mrigashirsha, or Ketu can be in Ardra. Similar to what we just did for the reverse. Ketu in Mrigashirsha is going to be a bit more of a diplomatic person, but they're going to be so diplomatic in this way. They're a unifier. They don't want to be personally biased. They don't want to... No, they want to be friends with everybody. But sometimes they have no firm values. Ketu and Mrigashirsha. They have no firm values. There's a sort of placating. They placate to everybody. And the Rahu in Mula is going to really feel when Mrigashirsha Ketu is placating. And that will cause you to be fake. But the Rahu in Mula is going to make you almost want to throw up. Like, I can't believe I wasn't real in that moment. It's like you're with, you're with your boyfriend or your husband who, it's like you're Mrigashirsha, let's say Mrigashirsha Ketu woman. She's with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend and her are walking, and they meet some old friends of her boyfriend's who have done something, or they had some, her boyfriend used to be known for doing something bad, or like he had to grow through this difficult thing. Like he used to be a thief, or he used to be an alcoholic, or whatever. And she's walking with them. She's got Mrigashirsha Ketu. And those old friends come along and say, "Hey, Drinky, hey, Rummy. Hey, how's it going there, big guy? Yeah, how you doing in your life? Yeah, we always knew that you were going to be a piece of shit because you were drinking so much." And all these things that are kind of embarrassing to the boyfriend. And the girl with Mrigashirsha Ketu is going to want to be diplomatic. So, I can understand them saying this in this moment, But as time goes on, her placating to those people, the Mula in her, Rahu and Mula, would eventually mature to say, okay, guys, let's get real. You were hanging with him at that time. You're probably just as drunk as he was, and look how much he's cleaned up. She'll come out hard with the Rahu and Mula, where, she's almost embarrassed that she used to placate in those kinds of moments, but now she's hard on it. So Mrigashirsha Ketu needs to learn to have an identity and firm values, and the Rahu and Mula is going to allow a sharpness in being real. And no matter how much Mrigashirsha tries to please everybody, this speech of this fracture in this person is going to cause some polarity. It's not going to be happy with everybody, but the Rahu has to do it, because that's a true key part of who you are, is being able to speak to what is true, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's painful, and even if it shows bias on your part. Still got to do it. So, then Ketu in Ardra is going to be, as we've said, this is the person who's a real cop. This is the real Batman energy. With Ketu and Mrigashirsha, you can do the Mula thing, describing the lies, in a way that is still diplomatic, that shows that you're still on everybody's side. With Ketu in Ardra, in Rahu, in Mula, it's a pretty good placement. If I remember correctly, I'd have to dig quickly into Ardra, and it's worth it. What the heck, we're here. I just want to see the interpretation. Saturn, Mars, and the nodes, and somewhat the Sun, contribute significantly towards bringing out this side of Ardra, indicating an uncompromising fearlessness in opposing and defying the lies and injustices in society, seeking the truth, being unwilling to compromise with deception. When Ardra malfunctions, it does not discriminate well about what should be destroyed and what should be preserved. So softer planets bring out that side of Ardra. When Ardra functions properly, it destroys things that deserve and need to be destroyed. So Saturn, Mars, and the nodes, and somewhat the Sun, do well in Ardra. So it's probably the better thing to have Ketu in Ardra and Rahu in Mula. Both of those nakshatras are hard, tough nakshatras that require hard malefic energies to function properly. So Ketu in Ardra and Rahu in Mula probably makes one of the great, it's painful because those are tough nakshatras, but these are tough energies. Ketu and Rahu are tough energies. We want to have them in tough nakshatras so that there's no, essentially the Ardra energy of seeking to describe injustices. When soft planets are there, it's going to do it in the wrong ways through its relationships and personal things. But when Ketu is there, it's going to, Ardra Ketu is going to beam with the truth of its consciousness, and no matter how hard and sharp it is, in order to do that, it will still be satisfying. There will be the right application of like a vigilante justice warrior energy. Again, it's like Batman, who is unafraid. Like he doesn't need to be known as this energy. With Ketu Ardra, you're eliminating karmic evil and energy inside yourself and inside of others that exists for the purpose of your energetic cleansing. You're not doing it because you want to get seen by everybody as this great journalist who is a big hero for being the underdog, for taking down the bad guy. Ardra Ketu will get used over time to just purifying evil for the sake of evil. But again, Ardra has to do exactly what Mula has to do. For this person, they are going to have negative energy. They seek to purify things. And simply the big thing is that they have to stop taking the specks out of their neighbor's eye and pull out the log in their own eye. Once Ketu and Ardra matures, the Rahu Mula is actually going to make you realize where you have been projecting, where you have been unfair. When you were Mr. Justice and you were this detective private eye, you put that guy behind bars, and you really rode hard on your brother, your big brother, because he did all these bad things. Ardra Ketu will do those kinds of things. And for example, Ketu and Ardra is going to be very hard on their big brother or someone that they're jealous of because there's projection going on. And Ardra Ketu eventually has to recognize when they are projecting, when it's coming from some personal insecurity inside of them that they know they've recognized now, that they're acting on an insecurity. And their social justice warrior energy is just pure anger and hatred that's not actually serving anybody. And they're just spewing darkness into the world. Sometimes Ardra Ketu will do this for a long time, but especially if Rahu is in Mula, Mula will help them to see the roots of truth, of the fact that they are themselves psychologically unwell and they need to cut out the root inside themselves. Then the Ardra and Mula energy can combine for positive ways to do great work in the world. They don't need to be seen by anybody. They're just doing it for their own karmic purification. And they can do great things. They can remove a lot of evil in the world. But again, you have to consider if there's personal planets involved with the nodes in their signs, or if the sign lord of the nodes is not well, then there's going to be chinks in this narrative. There's going to be things enwrapped in this narrative. If the sun is with Ketu in Ardra, or let's say if the sun is with Mula so the sun is with Rahu in the sign of Mula, then there's going to be some sun energy, some affectation of the father that the person will never feel fully satisfied in uprooting. The bitterness will never go away, and it will cause them to always be attacking authorities and attacking people in power, and they'll have complications with people who are in power who are there for good reasons who are doing the right thing, Rahu, Sun conjunct in Mula is just going to take it personally no matter what. And they're going to have an energy that frustrates them no matter what. They have to see that energy in themselves and just deal. Accept that energy, meditate, let the lightning pass through you as you continue to do your work as this uprooting person. Jazz Star is asking a question. So I'm going to, but I feel pretty good about how we rounded this up with Rahu and Ketu. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. You know, always feel free to let me know what you think about these interpretations, because I have a lot of fun moving through them, reading about the energy of the nakshatra, and then describing these things in this way. So let me know what you think when you can. We're almost done here. We still have some things left to go here. Now, Jazz Star is asking, hello Jazz Star. This may be off topic, but do you interpret aspect patterns with your approach, such as the Grand Cross? Those kinds of things do exist in astrology. I don't do too much with like a Grand Cross is definitely a big deal because that's just those 4 squares. But the Vedic people aren't as big with squares as they are with graha aspects. Vedic astrology kind of has its own graha aspects. But we do use these interpreted aspect patterns. It's just that they'll be different from typical Western ones. And thanks for that question, Jazz Star. So, we're almost done with Mula here now, folks. While we are here, the next thing for us to read, we've been discussing the interpretations of the planets. Now we're going to dig into the life lesson that Mula Nakshatra teaches all of us. And this is a life lesson. This is a consciousness that people in Mula Nakshatra are going to be especially sensitive to. But everybody can get something out of this reading. Because just like how, even if you have no planets in Leo, and it's in like the 2nd house, and there's no aspects, even if there's no aspects to it, we all still have Leo in our chart. It is an archetype. It relates to the sun. The sun is channeled through Leo, or rather Leo is channeled through the sun. So we all have Leo in our chart even if there's no planets there. In the same way, we all have Mula Nakshatra in our chart even if there's no planets there. So this life lesson teaches us a little bit about this energy that we all convey. And it's understandable where it's at, right? What we read is, the first lesson that Mula Nakshatra gives us is that it is good to be non-conformant and defiant against an untruth. The Vedas have ascribed a goddess to this very topic, that being Nirrti. The intention to be non-conformant with untruth is the beginning of understanding truth in reality. The second lesson is that lies will destroy themselves. All we have to do is shine light on how they contradict and attack each other. If you have to figure out a very complex strategy to defeat a lie, it might not be a lie at all. All that needs to be done is to point out how one statement clashes with another. The third lesson that this Nakshatra Sutra teaches us is how to target and detect untruth. Untruth reveals itself by disharmony. It will not sit right with the rest of the facts that surround it. It will continue to struggle with them. It'll become nervous, defensive, convoluted, and cunning. Truth is protected by the fact that that is true. It needs no defense and no strategy. It is very simple, straightforward, consistent, and plain. Truth, therefore, has a calm, innocent, childlike, and somewhat unprepared or spontaneous confidence. Lies proliferate, complicate, and become entangled in one another, whereas truth is simple, singular, constant, and open. That's why Mula is very good and sensitive at reading these things in people. Finally, this sutra also explains why we die, or what anything and everything comes to an end. As long as we have not discovered the truth of who and what we are, we will know only untruths about ourselves. These untruths become very complex and plural. Then they rub against and contradict each other, causing their inevitable mutual destruction. If we can eventually discover the truth of who and what we are, the necessity of death disappears. Some deep spirituality in that little life lesson that Vic has given us there. Now we have our final supplication. I think these usually come from the Taittiriya Brahmana, which is not just the sutras, but it's also got a whole bunch of commentaries with it. So these supplications are prayers that come from various Vedic texts. And this is what Vic gives us here. Mula produces heroes who cast falsehoods, Nirrti, far away. Thus it protects innocence, the animals and cows, giving great prosperity. Mula Nakshatra shines a bright light, establishing goodness. Its words cast untruth out. Auspiciousness flourishes, and I too become auspicious. Beautiful, deep description of Mula Nakshatra there. Wonderful. Now, this has been a long podcast today. We have one more reading to go, ladies and gentlemen. And this is going to be the description of the Mula Nakshatra native. And this is coming from the divine forces of the Lunar Nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas by an author known as Radhe. Now, let's keep in mind, as I always feel inclined to say, that when we're reading from this author, there's a reason why I'm reading from this author. She's very well researched. She really digs her teeth into the Vedic descriptions of all of the deities that are defined as the deities of the nakshatras, the nakshatra devatas. All of them exist in here in this wonderful book, and she describes them all with meticulous attention to detail. And she really gets the bottom. She gets to the bottom of this, to use a very Mula phrase. She really gets to the bottom of things. Now, that being said, we have to keep in mind the caveat that she is a sidereal practitioner. So there are times when, especially when we read about her description of the native, because all of their other stuff she talks about is Nirrti, for example. I'm going to be doing a video describing Nirrti in the Vedas from this book. And it's all in the Vedas. It's all way before the horoscope was invented. But she does her own interpretation of a native who has significant planet placements, or the Lagna, or the moon. The moon and the Lagna being the most key. The moon being the biggest one. She gives a description of the Mula native. And when she does, she often will use as her examples things that would be a sidereal astrologer would use. Now, as a tropical Vedic astrologer, I'm wary of this, and I'll always mention it whenever I see it happening, and I'll usually try not to bring it in, kind of thing, you know? But the author is wonderful. She understands the psyche of the nakshatras very well, and that's why I like to include her in my readings. So without further ado, let's now discuss the native of the Mula Nakshatra. Now, what we read is that Mula, as well as Ashlesha and Jesta, is classified by Jyotisha Shastra as a sharp, Tikshna nakshatra, as well as a demonic, Rakshasa nakshatra. So it's not only dreadful and sharp, that's Tikshna, but it's also classified as a Rakshasa nakshatra. Again, this is Jyotisha Shastra. So it's hard to say whether there's any distortion there, but let's speak to it here and digest it in our own way. What the author says is that this is no surprise, given its rulership by a goddess of death, destruction, and decay. It's Nirrti. Now, defined as root, that's Mula, defined as root and associated with family genetics, Mula Nakshatra represents deep-seated vasanas, or inclinations, inherited from one's past lives or ancestral lineage. With the ancient name Vrikratau, which means the two that uproot or transform, Mula can be envisioned as the two-stranded DNA chain of molecules or roots, responsible for our physical, mental, and emotional makeup. As such, this nakshatra is extremely karmic. It's a hot spring that scorches the surface of reality as it percolates up from the bowels of the earth. Either the native himself or the person represented by the Mula planet is here to burn through intense karma. For example, if the sun, which is the karaka of the father, or the ninth Bhavabhavesha, which is the ninth lord, so that's the planet that rules the ninth house from the rising sign, right? So if the sun or the ninth lord implicates Mula, then perhaps the father might experience an extremely difficult or painful life. Alternatively, the father might be a challenging but transformational influence on the native. So that's if you have the sun or the ninth lord in Mula Nakshatra. Very interesting. Now, Nirrti is described as Mother Earth. And as Mother Earth, if you're going to read, if you should decide to go farther in this discussion on Nirrti, I've got a video, like I said, that I've already done. I'm going to produce it after this video, and it's describing Nirrti in the Vedas. And Nirrti is described as Mother Earth, who puts pressure on everything in order to create the diamond, which is this precious condensation of karma. So essentially, we are born here on earth to make diamonds in the soul. And that's what Mother Earth, as Kali Ma, as Nirrti, kind of intends to do. So as Mother Earth, Nirrti and her nakshatra Mula have much in common with the Muladhara chakra. Muladhara. It means rooted in support. And it's the chakra governed by the earth element. The energy of the Muladhara chakra is oriented towards self-preservation. It is our ability to feel secure in the world and our capacity to provide for ourselves on the physical realm. The solid, grounding, and nourishing qualities that the Muladhara chakra imparts give a stable foundation from which to survive and flourish in life. That's why Kali Ma, the red, is very associated with the red chakra. But the earth of Nirrti is void of vegetation. Again, you would have read that as we've discussed in this Nirrti in the Vedas video. Nirrti is the mother of the barren earth before vegetation occurred. And then Aditi, who is the ruler of Punarvasu, Aditi brought the vegetation, brought the actual life. Whereas Nirrti is the barren earth structure. It's the hard undertow, the bottom of space. The earth of Nirrti is void of vegetation. It lacks vegetation. And so the native may have fears that their basic needs will be unfulfilled. Indeed, rather than security and stability, the Mula native experiences volatility and unpredictability in their life. The goddess Nirrti's hollow crevices and dark caverns lack the solidity that the native so desperately seeks. And if an unresolved sense of limitation sets in this person, then illness, disease, and decay may be the result. On the other hand, with a natal chart in which Mula is unafflicted and indications of strength are evident, then the native has a very different experience and can fulfill the healthy, life-affirming aspects of the Muladhara chakra. Stable and grounded in reality, the native takes responsibility for their own destiny and likely teaches others to do the same, either by example or by discussion, by speech, by art, by however they're going to do it. By teaching is the word I wanted to say. This person lives and chooses a dharmic life, thereby creating positive karma, and actively pursues opportunities for growth and knowledge. Moving beyond life in the Muladhara chakra, the native awakens to higher states of consciousness. They find the diamond that lies buried deep beneath the hardened, barren surface of life. Beautiful, beautiful. Rooted in confidence and self-understanding, this native is adept at assisting those searching for resolutions of deep-seated fear, anxiety, and anger. This person really becomes, in a way, the arbiter of the healthy red root Muladhara chakra. The native may elect a career as a psychotherapist, a past life regression counselor, or NLP, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. Or perhaps they are a geneticist. Any career that requires uncovering the root cause of complex and mysterious physical issues or psychosis is well suited to the Mula Nakshatra native. Representing intense Kundalini-like forces, the Rudra-based nakshatras, that's Ardra, Ashlesha, Mula, and the Bhadrapadas, are particularly adept at working with sharp, serpentine forces in a healing and a curative fashion. Now, a positive role model of the take charge Mula Nakshatra native is Oprah Winfrey, who apparently has Mula as her rising sign, who's best known for her talk show, The Oprah Winfrey Show. Oprah is the daughter of a single teenage mother who was born into poverty. She experienced considerable hardship during childhood, including sexual abuse. Yet, despite her early life circumstances, Oprah went on to become the host of the highest-rated talk show in America. She's a self-made billionaire and acclaimed as the greatest black philanthropist in American history, according to the author. However, even in the best of charts, the Mula Nakshatra native is periodically thrown a curveball. Rather than gently and gracefully floating down the river of life, this native often finds themselves occasionally in the middle of whitewater rapids. The only way to survive such hazardous waters is by attentive and ever so precise maneuvering. One wrong move, and this native can suddenly be free-falling over a steep and perilous drop. To avoid such calamities in life, this native must fully understand the structural capacities of their raft and have utmost respect for the powers of nature. Otherwise, serious consequences are likely assured. Now, Mula, as well as other Rudra-ruled nakshatras, is not only... I should say this quickly before... What do we mean when we're talking about the Rudra-ruled nakshatras? Am I right on this? Yes. So there are these classifications of the nakshatra devatas. The first three are kind of just in their own category, and then so are the pitris. Excuse me, I got the burpees today. Now, there's the Adityas, which relates to sattva and heaven. There's the Rudras, which relates to the rajas and to the atmosphere. And then there's the Vasus, which relates to earth and the elements. Now, the Rudras of the atmosphere are windy, and they're considered to be intense. They have this Rudra Shiva-like energy. And that's Ardra, the Bhadrapadas, Mula, and Ashlesha. They have this Rudra-like energy of atmosphere, of the middle realm, that's neither happy to be grounded nor happy to be sailing freely in the air. They're exchanging between those two, and then they're Rajasic. So this is what it means when we talk about Mula as one of these Rudra nakshatras. So Mula, as well as the other Rudra-ruled nakshatras, is not only volatile in nature, but as well it holds the potential for producing some of the most unconventional and outlandish personalities in the world. The example that the author gives is John Belushi, who had Mula Lagna. Mula was on their rising sign. Belushi is one of the original cast members of the Saturday Night Live franchise, became an overnight hit with his wild and raunchy humor. He went on to star in National Lampoon's Animal House, playing the part of an outrageous party animal frat. Being hugely successful, Belushi was without a doubt one of the most talented and original comedians in show business. Yet, his shadow side involved wild emotional swings and drug and alcohol addiction. Just as quickly as Belushi rose to the top, his career and life ended abruptly, dying as he did at the early age of 33 from a drug overdose. The author, with her often rather heavy depiction of Mula, I'm going to just read it honestly because it's what she says, and she's done more research on it than I have. What we read is that there is no such thing as luck when it comes to Mula. Abide by the laws of nature or experience life as one big grade 6 whitewater adventure. The Mula native who elects to experience the dark side of life must work to keep their head above water. However they have to do that. Or else the darkness that is part of the nature of this nakshatra will be all-encompassing and will be an acid that melts the container that holds it and will bring them underneath. Wonderful, as usual. I love reading the work of Radhe in her descriptions of the nakshatras because she applies such a personal view to the reading of the nakshatras. Now, this has been a long video already, so we're definitely going to want to call her a day now, folks. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope that you guys have been enjoying hanging out and discussing this Mula Nakshatra. We have Shubham here, who has Mula Nakshatra. From childhood, they've been spiritual, very interested in astrology and meditation. Thanks for the comment there, Shubham. So we definitely see that Mula has this character, you know. And I'm glad that I've got to describe the Mula Nakshatra character through these sutras. So always, as usual, folks, keep your eyes peeled. There's more stuff coming in the world of Dustin Cormier. We got more videos of planets and signs. We've got rising signs. And I'll be releasing a book soon. So you guys are going to be hearing about that as it comes along. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this. And namaste. I appreciate everybody very dearly for hanging out with me and watching these videos as I like to do them. And something that I keep intending to do, and I don't actually end up doing it. Yeah, well, whatever. It's okay. For those of you who are watching, you can, you know, I should start advocating for myself. I've got a PayPal thing that you can throw me a line on. You can find it in the description box of this video as well. I have it right here. If you should ever feel like it, thanks for watching. You can donate through my paypal.me/DustinCormier91 link. And you can find that in the description box. But ultimately, I just love talking about astrology and sharing this information. So thank you for being a part of it with me.